Welcome everybody to this panel, which is entitled the Homeless Friendly Cultural Space. This is a big topic at ARHI. We did some work a few years ago now with Museum of Homelessness, who you might hear from in a minute, all about how cultural spaces, so museums, libraries, galleries, they could be more sort of open and welcoming to the homeless community. There's often high levels of homelessness around cultural spaces, and there wasn't any shared practice on how to work with people who are or have been homeless. So we created some resources in partnership with the Museum of Homelessness, and we developed them into a toolkit, and we do lots of training. We've trained all sorts of cultural spaces, like the one we're in today, which is the Old Diorama Art Centre in London. You're going to hear more about that too in a minute from over there. And we've even managed to reach international audiences by training a lot of people in Brazil with this training. But today we sort of specifically want to sort of talk about what people are actually doing. So we've got some great examples here, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves in a minute. So without further ado, let's get on with it. We have got a panel member who's joining us remotely from Brazil, and we've got consecutive translation for that. Right, so let's start. I think you've got a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start this side.
Yes.
Did I say my name? I did say my name.
It's Katie.
Good.
Well
right. Right. So just in case I didn't say my name, because I think I might have forgotten, my name's Katie Langford, and I'm going to pass over to Claire Rivers from the Old Diorama, Old Diorama
Art Centre.
Art Centre. Thank you, Claire. Go for it.
I would never tease you about that in public. You can say as many letters as you like. I'm Claire Rivers, and I am the programme manager for One Roof, which is the Arts and Homelessness programme that we are running here at ODAC. That transition occurred a few months ago. Prior to that, I was the centre manager responsible for our income, basically for the building, for the core costs, which is why I think this is a particularly interesting panel for me, because I want to talk about how we try to make those two strands integrate.
Great, thank you so much, Claire. I'm going to go now to my left to the wonderful Matt Turtle. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Matt Turtle. I'm the co-founder and director of Museum of Homelessness. We've already heard a bit about the museum, so I won't say much. Just to say, for anyone joining this panel fresh, who wasn't there at the last panel when Jess was speaking, the other co-founder. We have a bricks and mortar building in Finsbury Park, which we opened last year, but the charity and museum is 10 years old. We do a lot of campaigning and research and direct work with communities of people affected by homelessness. In fact, the museum is developed and run by people who have varying experiences of homelessness, and we also do a lot of arts-based stuff and heritage-based stuff, but we try and bring the two together. And it's been my real privilege to see the seed of an idea of a museum of homelessness develop into this. Sometimes it feels like a tornado over the last few years, and very much in the eye of the storm.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And over now to Pete. Some people are doing some amazing work as well. So, Sarah, you're from the factory in Manchester.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit more about that and your other connection?
Yes, I'm here with, I guess, I've got one hat on, but I'm here with two hats on, I guess. Three hats, including mine. So the first hat is I'm engagement manager at Factory International. That's probably maybe this is correct, one of the newest arts and cultural spaces in the UK, built in Manchester. But that's really kind of got a longish history to it. So I started working in the arts for Manchester International Festival, which was a biannual arts festival. We didn't have a home. We took over various spaces across the city every 2 years and created new work. So we premiered a lot of new work. My role has always been working with various communities across Greater Manchester. And the festival is now under the umbrella of Factory International. So that's the organisation, and we are based at Aviva Studios, which is this new cultural space owned by Manchester City Council and which we operate out of. And I suppose then my other role in this is back in 2016, we started working on a project called Manchester Street Poem, and that was kind of a really I don't want to steal Simon's thunder on it, but a co-produced project working with people with lived experience of homelessness across Manchester, and that is a project that we've been involved in since, as I say, 2016, still co-produced to this day, and I am now one of the trustees of that charity. So yeah.
Amazing. So you're starting to get a flavour for the amazing panel that we have. Right, over to you, Simon. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, so I run Manchester Street Poem at the moment. That's my main gig, and I was part of the group that put it on. It was a project initially for MIF 2017, and then the group that came together to co-produce that project, which was a homelessness project. We kind of felt after that festival that we wanted to do more, that there was legs in what we were doing, and we all were super energised about it, and we felt that being a charity was probably the best vehicle to keep doing what we were doing. So I was kind of led the charge to become a charity, and kind of been there to this day. So yeah, I mean, we're a small grassroots cultural space, but we have a pretty close relationship with Factory International, which is a cultural monolith, you know, it's huge. And what Sarah didn't say is that like the Factory is probably the biggest sort of cultural investment made by this country in in a generation, you know. So we're very lucky in Manchester that we've got this 120 million pound, however much, I don't know, it was bloody expensive anyway. But it's there, it's on our doorstep. We've got a close relationship with, with Factory. I mean, they're almost our parents, really, you know, in a way. So, yeah, we feel like we're in quite a privileged position to be able to guide the future of this huge space, and there's other things we do as well, but yeah, so that's where we're at the moment. We've had a bit of time out, I had some health issues last year, so things kind of ground to a halt a little bit, but we're sort of just trying to co-produce the next stage of our incarnation, whatever comes next. We're not sure yet, but we're in the business of trying to find out and set up the spaces and the atmosphere to sort of work that out in a kind of authentic way.
And with that connection with the Factory, that's just wonderful. Yeah. Great. Right, so hopefully we'll talk about that in a bit more depth, but I just want to see if the tech gurus, the gods of Zoom, have managed to... No, the gods of Zoom say no. So,
have any attempts been made to appease the Zoom gods? Some microchips.
So I don't think we can hear from Evelyn just yet.
She's not even on the call.
Okay, all right. Okay, so hopefully we will hear from Evelyn over in Sao Paulo, but let's just do what we can in the room for now. So, I don't know, I don't think you were all here yesterday, but we had this wonderful panel about international street papers, and we heard from a lovely woman called Juliana who works for Revista Tracos, a street paper, where they describe their sellers or vendors, not as sellers or vendors, but as spokespersons for culture. So, because they believe they are the people, the front-facing, they know their city and they're talking, and it's just, they're perfect to represent the social impact of art and culture on the community. So with that in mind, which I really like that, it's stuck in my head, what can cultural spaces do to deepen their involvement with the homelessness community? Now, has anybody got a burning desire to go first on this one?
I mean, I can start us off if you want.
Thank you, Simon.
I kind of don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. I think, different cultural providers in different places, different areas, need to approach it in a different way. I think what's important is the consultation process, and, ask the communities that are involved, that you're hoping to attract, see what it is that's going to encourage them to be part of it. I mean, you have to be quite considerate of setting up the right environment and the the safe spaces for people to do that. You know, don't assume that everybody's got the confidence to bowl into a boardroom and sort of say the piece. You know, there's other ways that you can invite people's opinions. I mean, we use painting on cardboard, you know, get messy, get creative and do it that way. But, you know, again, that's not an approach that necessarily worked for everybody. But yeah, I think key is to ask.
So we just had some nice sounds, sort of a sound piece.
Yeah, just to give a bit of
Just
depth.
to give a bit of oomph to what you were saying. Yeah.
Deepen in the.
Yeah, it really speaks with gravitas.
And so in Manchester, are there spaces that you like to use, or your group, or
Well, I mean, it really made a difference for us when we got our own space. We were kind of floating around for a while, and then we got a space in a place called Islington Mill, which is like a big, it's a mill, if you will believe that, but it's dedicated artistic spaces, affordable, never going to be developed into flats or anything like most of Manchester. So yeah, physical spaces are really important.
So is that something you think that groups could benefit up and down the country of, you know, if the museums and libraries are trying to attract more community, to be able to open up those spaces? Sorry, that just occurred to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and Factory have done something similar. You know, they've allocated a space in their big, beautiful new building that's going to be purpose-made for, you know, for communities to go in and use. Not necessarily just homeless communities, but,
That's
you know,
amazing.
people that generally don't feel like these spaces are for them. And I think that's the biggest barrier that you're getting over, is within people, them feeling like this is for us, this is somewhere for us to go. That's the big battle, I think.
And that's the perfect time for Sarah to come in, I think, to answer that question.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think it is, and it's, for me, I mean, I agree with sort of everything that Simon's saying. I think the biggest thing is that kind of relinquishing of control. Often people can, you know, like, oh, right, we need to engage with X community, or we are trying to reach this community, and actually it's not about thinking, as Si says, there's not one size fits all, but there's also not one, like, it shouldn't be one organisation coming up with the solution to something. And I think that's it. So it's about kind of relinquishing control, not necessarily trying to come up with a solution in isolation, not reinventing the wheel when we've got so many amazing people already in the city endlessly doing this work. So I think that was something that kind of came through with Street Poem, and I think it's now the approach I'm very much trying to take into my work at Factory. Is this isn't about Factory coming up with a solution or trying to engage with the community. It's a co-created approach between Factory and other people across the city, made up of people with lived experience, made up of people working in the sector day in, day out, to kind of help shape what actually is going to work in those spaces and places.
It's
Yeah.
a very exciting time then in Manchester. So, wow.
Yeah. We were biased,
So we've
but-
sort of, you know, this is I'm hearing this ownership, a space for us, not that you've been sort of slotted into an existing space and we want to reach these, you know, certain people. So actually it brings us perfectly, because on either side of me are two organisations. They're very different, but there's a similarity. So ODAC, Old Diorama Art Centre, was a squat that originally where artists came together and they squatted, and this is the foundations of the place that you are in right now, and has led to this amazing community arts space, which we'll hear from. And then of course on my other side I have the Museum of Homelessness, who have completely co-created their museum from the community. I think I will ask you to go first. Sorry, I wasn't sure which way I was going then. So Matt, do you want to comment on that? Because it's a very different take as well of, and I'm not saying it's a good, you know, either is better than the other. It's just really interesting, the approaches that people are taking at the moment on this panel.
Yeah, I think the similarities come from the foundations of what's happening, and then what the foundations are built on. Because I think when a cultural organisation has a competing agenda, be it they want to be a tourist attraction at the expense of being properly inclusive, or they're built upon like extractive, toxic cultures which deprioritise inclusion, that's where you get problems. But if you started out as a squat, or if you started from scratch and you were a community first museum rather than a collections first museum, that's what we try and be, then you have a genuinely more inclusive culture and people feel it as that rather than feeling it as tokenizing or instrumentalizing or extractive. And that translates across funded projects, it translates across welcome, welcome to the building, and culturally the inclusive organisation will do things that will make people feel better when they're in their spaces. It just will. That doesn't occur, unfortunately, to large numbers of museums, galleries, cultural spaces around the UK. So I'm really happy to be here to be able to talk about that, and because there's a lot to change, but we are seeing change, and that's a really positive thing. And hearing about
I think
your
most places
plans,
want to change, don't they?
it's
Most
just
places
amazing.
want to be that, you know.
Like it's very rare. Like what you were talking about, like the biggest cultural investment for a long time in the UK. Like when we were hearing about those kinds of things in like the Blair years and stuff like that, where they were building huge cultural organisations and museums, you didn't have this kind of conversation.
No, that's
Things
true.
changed.
And you've been on quite a journey at the old Diorama Art Centre. Obviously that was a very long time ago.
I
but
wasn't here
No,
for
no,
the bit
it's
in the
fine.
70s when it was a squat. I wasn't here for that. But yeah, apparently it was a... So in terms of, in bricks and mortar terms, to borrow your phrase, the original Diorama building is opposite Regent's Park. And it was... From what I've heard, it was kind of everything. There were raves, there were classes, there was this whole other community. And our former chair of the board of trustees used to sweep up after the raves when he was a teenager in the mornings. But then we've been a charity since 1981.
Wow.
And I kind of feel like we're returning to that time in a very positive way, in the sense that, firstly, we still have some of the ravers on our board of trustees, real ones.
Great.
They've calmed down. But it's nice to feel like we are resharing with that community again. And I think for us, it was... Because of this campus, so sorry for those of you on Zoom who haven't had to walk here, but we're on a quite a high-profile but businessy campus, and from outside, Old Diorama Art Centre is a big glass building, and at a glance, it could be a bank, it could be many things. So our first step was trying to get any members of the community that weren't paying to be here to come in, to use the facilities. We're a Camden Council warm space, so anyone is welcome to come in, warm up, make themselves a cup of tea or coffee. The reception team are under very strict orders that are not difficult to keep because they're all lovely, very strict orders to be incredibly nice and welcoming to everyone, without exception. And that is sort of the core of it for us. So once we get people in, because we are a community centre. We're quite a fancy community centre in some ways, but that was important, just to get the local area in, and with that, this just the general welcome. I'm hoping it was word of mouth that we're friendly.
Definitely.
That we're friendly and inclusive, that has brought people here.
No.
Who let him in?
I think it's obvious. Obviously, you can't get the flavour of this on Zoom, but if you come here in person, that it is the whole community are here, and that is everyone, and that is, I think, what cultural spaces surely should be aspiring to. That you have mothers and babies and children,
we have all
and
sorts.
you have everybody, every cross section, and I think you come in here and it's vibrant and buzzing, and you can go into the kitchen and make a cup of tea, and you might be rubbing shoulders with some famous people because they also hire out the spaces here to pay. Is that right, isn't it?
Yeah, I always forget about that part
Yeah.
of the company.
It's really unique. So,
No, you can feel it right at the front door straight
You can,
away.
yeah.
As soon as you come in, it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
a welcoming space. You know.
Great.
that's lovely to hear.
Really nice to hear.
This is my first time here.
Oh, that's so. Like, there we go. And I didn't even set that up or prep him before at all. And so, How do you combine all of this? So this is we've just sort of said how you do it, in a way. I suppose you're still struggling through this, but how do you combine ethics and business considerations?
That, I think, is probably the thing that we talk about most internally. As I said when I was introducing myself, I was in charge of the team that do the bookings, that get the money in as well. So, and I balanced the two roles for a while.
It's hard.
But realistically, destigmatizing the community of people experiencing homelessness is, you have to create environments where different types of people are integrating, and what we kind of want from our client base, and I know it's very bold to suggest that we can pick and choose our clients, but we're very popular in that. I want theatre companies, film companies, TV companies, all the people that come here, I want them to be choosing us in part for our inclusivity, for our work with the homeless community. And I want that to be something that it's in our strategic vision, missions, etc. It's a part of what Old Diorama is. So it's essentially no longer going to be an option to come here and rent a space and not expect to, bump into a homeless artist, because it's
Great. Yeah.
they've become part of the structural integrity of the building.
Yeah. No, honestly, and we know of other spaces, so like the Museum of Tomorrow over in Rio, in Brazil, and of course the Uma Voz Choir, which is Portuguese, bad Portuguese, sorry Jan if you're listening to this, for With One Voice Choir, and they are based out of the Museum of Tomorrow, and that has all come about because of that relationship, and that's their permanent home. So I think, cultural sort of spaces have so much to give just to everybody. How do you feel about combining ethics and business considerations? You've got a very different take over at MOH, I'm sure.
Yeah, I feel all right about it. I think it's because we never started out with being a destination or being a tourist attraction and having to meet all these income targets that a lot of museums get saddled with. We developed a museum where, if you buy into the museum's vision for things, then and if you would ever give us money, which you don't ever have to do, but you'd be supporting not just the arts-based activities that we do and all of that work, but also the fact that we, we've just recently piloted the first ever emergency winter shelter in our museum in the UK, and we publish findings and keep a memorial for everyone in the UK who's died whilst homeless. We're an organisation that speaks out on things that are going on in homelessness settings, as well as being a museum. And I think so when it comes to kind of to sort of making money as a cultural organisation, I feel that people who were in our community, and we very much think of people who in the Museums Network as community members, they're sort of supporting that side of things, and they want to see the broader change that we're trying to make. So that's why that feels good. I think it can be done very badly. I think we're all familiar with tokenising charity fundraising messaging or things like that. It's can be done difficult, and we're all we know about controversial museum sponsorship deals and stuff, so you have to check your ethics constantly and really be a reflective organisation. But I think if you make inclusion your sole overriding purpose and you put the years in, like ODAC have done, like you have done, working together, developing Street Perm, and now, with the opportunities at Factory, then you see the benefits and people get behind it.
Yeah. I think we've got Evelyn online. Hey, welcome. Have a big round of applause. Yay, the Zoom gods. Yes, hey, thanks Evelyn. Sorry, just in case, we have a screen to the left of us here, so if we're talking to you like that, it's because we're talking to the screen. I'm trying to talk to the camera. So hopefully you got that, Evelyn. Welcome. Jan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm translating on the phone for Evelyn so she can understand what's happening.
Oh, I see. I thought you were going to do consecutive out loud, so that's why that threw me. Sorry, Jan.
No, we will have to do consecutive out loud when Evelyn speaks. It's just so that she can understand you. I'm speaking to her on the phone, and then when she speaks, it will be consecutive.
Oh, this is amazing. Whoever's
Amazing.
managed to hook this
Actually, I
up.
like this.
Oh, this is Jan.
Oh, you can have.
we look at Jan as well?
Yeah, he's very handsome. It's nice.
Handsome, yeah. Handsome.
Yeah, right. Welcome, Evelyn. Sorry, to this raucous panel today. Joining us from Brazil. Would you like to just say just take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and say a little bit about Pop Rua, the amazing festival, and the work of the Museum of Portuguese Language. And bom dia.
Bom dia. Primeiro, desculpa aí, tivemos uma questão técnica, mas com a ajuda do pessoal eu consegui entrar.
So first of all, good morning to you, and it's great to be here. Sorry to be late, we have some technical problems, as you're aware.
I'm going to pause one moment, Jan. Just we've got a bit of a weird you sound like a Dalek. We're just waiting to sort that out. Sorry.
I was going to say, when they're not speaking, they need to mute themselves.
Right, so when you're not, this is very complicated. Another layer here, it's a bit like Squid Game. So another, I promise it's not. So you just need to unmute yourselves when you're speaking, when you're not speaking even. Yeah, that's it, thanks. Did you get that? Right, let's try again.
You okay, hon?
Oh, I'm fine, yeah, I'm just laughing. Did you get that, Jan?
I did, yes, thank you. I've just
Great.
explained
That's
to,
much better now. That works. Great. All right.
So-
Sorry. Do you want to continue, and I'll shut up?
No, that's fine. Just I'll ask Evelyn to carry on then.
Então, eu sou a Evelyn, falo aqui de São Paulo, Brasil. Sou historiadora, especialista em direitos humanos, trabalho no campo da cultura, mais precisamente em museus, há cerca de 20 anos. E hoje eu estou aqui no Museu da Língua Portuguesa, coordenando a articulação social e estando aí na equipe de coordenação desse festival, que eu já vou contar.
Okay, so my name's Evelyn, I'm from Sao Paulo. I'm a historian specialising in human rights, but I've been working in the field of culture for the last 20 years, and at the moment I am at the Museum of the Portuguese Language in Sao Paulo, coordinating their social actions, and I was also one of the coordinators of the festival that you talked about, Katie, and which I'll explain a little bit more about now.
Yes. Oh, please do.
Essa frente de articulação social, ela existe justamente para facilitar o relacionamento entre o museu e os públicos mais vulnerabilizados aqui do território onde o museu está inserido, né? Estamos no centro de São Paulo, que é uma região absurdamente cosmopolita, mas é também muito sensível no que diz respeito aos grupos sociais.
So this team that I coordinate, which is, we call this sort of social networking team, as it were, it basically coordinates social actions, has the specific aim of facilitating our relationships with vulnerable populations around the museum who live near here, because we're right in the centre of Sao Paulo. It's an incredibly cosmopolitan area, but also there are vulnerable communities, and so they need to be treated with sensitivity.
E a gente tem conseguido fazer aqui uma coisa que é muito pioneira em São Paulo, e podemos até dizer no Brasil, que é conseguir trabalhar em rede. E trabalhar em rede não significa dizer só museu, mas trabalhar com todos os agentes que atuam nesse território. A área da saúde, assistência social, cultura, os movimentos sociais, os coletivos artísticos e a própria população.
What we're doing here is something that is particularly pioneering in Sao Paulo, and I dare to say possibly pioneering for the whole of Brazil, and that is to create networks not just with other museums, but networks with all the different organizations within the area that we are based in. So we talk about health organizations, health teams, social work teams, social movements, artist collectives as well.
That is
E depois
wonderful.
de 2 anos de trabalho bastante dedicado na criação dessas redes, a gente entendeu que a gente tinha maturidade para dar um passo maior e criamos então esse festival com o grande objetivo de visibilizar ações que atendem a população em situação de rua no mundo, para convidar, para incentivar as outras instituições culturais aqui da nossa região a olhar para essa população enquanto público potencial, não só enquanto problema social que precisa ser afastado das instituições.
So after having sort of had this network in place for a few years, we decided we had enough experience and maturity to take the next step, and that was creating the big festival that you obviously mentioned, Katie, to bring visibility to the homeless population around the museum, and to start seeing them in a different way, seeing them as a potential audience, public for our museum, and not as a social problem that we need to remove from the area.
That's great.
E é claro e evidente que vocês são uma inspiração para nós, então já deixo aqui o meu agradecimento. E aí a gente, então, ao longo de 18 anos, a gente aciona essa rede para construir junto com a gente o que a princípio seria um seminário e que com esses diálogos se transforma nesse grande festival, que ocupou as ruas do nosso território por 3 dias, em agosto de 2023. Agosto é o mês de luta da população em situação de rua. E aí com uma frente de discussões, uma programação cultural intensa e uma feira de serviços. A gente conseguiu atender cerca de 10 mil pessoas em 3 dias.
I forgot to mention in the last part of the answer that she also said the reason for taking this next step was also not just to bring visibility, but also to inspire other cultural organisations in the centre of Sao Paulo to do the same. And also, Evelyn would like to thank you, Ahi, for your inspiration, because they have drawn a lot of inspiration from you. Initially, so basically this social team, as it were, had been in operation for 18 years, and initially their idea was to hold a seminar, but in the end it morphed into this massive festival that occupied the streets of Sao Paulo for 3 days, with lots of different debates going on, lots of cultural shows, activities involving homeless artists as well, and a fair, what she called a service fair, and they believe that over 10,000 people attended the festival during those 3 days, and it happened in August, which is important, it's significant because August is the month of the fight for rights for homeless people in Brazil.
It was an incredible festival. As they said, it took place on the street outside the museum, and there's a busy train station there, so lots of people commuting, walking straight through the festival, just happening in the street, and it was full of joy and such an inspiration. Like, honestly, it was huge, and but the most touching thing for me was they thought about the pets, about homeless pets, because they had a beauty sort of salon there, and the dogs were getting makeovers and little jewels stuck on them. Little details like that are so human, and probably wasn't what you're expecting on a panel about sort of cultural spaces, but it's the details. Thank you, Evelyn. I'll come back to you. I've started asking questions. We've been talking about what cultural spaces can do to deepen access, and your festival is a perfect example of definitely opening up culture. But then we moved on to talk about the sort of ethics, combining ethics and business considerations. I just wondered if you had anything else to add on that, because I didn't give you a chance, Sarah and Simon. You can do it as a two or a one.
Well, I suppose very, very quickly, just to say that I think those business considerations, I mean, I've definitely seen, we've gone from when I joined the festival, we were a team of 15 people making something, building on something for every 2 years. Now we are a team of over 200 operating a large building,
Wow.
producing year-round work. So obviously the business needs are, and the overheads are considerably more significant than we've ever had. But I think it goes back to what Matt was saying, which is that if your core values and the core values of those people leading the organisation are of inclusivity, then actually a lot of the forms of governance around that, the ethics community, but governance and how that is broadened, again in terms of that relinquishing of control, I think that is where those two can sit, not comfortably next to each other, but can sit alongside each other.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to combine them early. I mean, you know, if you try and, you know, if you've got a business model and then you try and shoehorn ethics in at a later date, it's not really going to work. But if you get your values very clear in the first stand and then conduct your business through the lens of those values, that feels like a better way to do it. You come with some, you get better outcomes doing it that way.
I mean, you know, we've got these sort of they play a civic role in our society, and I know a lot of museums and libraries and galleries want to open up, maybe because they get funding and they have to tick boxes now, I don't know sometimes, but we are asking our sort of society to come together more as a community, I think. Well, maybe it's just because of I work with people like you who are actually doing that, but that's how it feels. And I really believe they could become centres for artists and every type of person. And we're really undernourished for culture, I think, in a way, in this country. It's sort of, I don't know if it's very accessible to all. I don't know, so that's a whole new question I just made up on the spot.
Well, I think culture's under siege, isn't it?
It is.
Like the landscape for cultural practitioners and cultural venues is really bad, and so it's not surprising to me that we're in a situation where community building cultural organisations like what we're all experiencing right now, being in this room, and other organisations further afield, what we're hearing about from Evelyn in Sao Paulo, this is the future, because this is not only how you can create a business case, and as we look at what you go from a seminar to a street festival, engaging countless organisations and people, what's the better business case? This is why it's the future, because there's a clear societal need for more communal, civic, creative spaces, and people need to feel that, and so the business will follow it. Yeah,
and it's partnerships and these networks, and that's what Evelyn is saying. They've sort of worked with all these different people, and we talk about co-creation a lot at AHI, Arts and Homelessness International. I meant to be saying the full name.
I mean, this is something that worries me about Manchester, because obviously you've had gentrification on steroids down here for God knows how long, but we're really getting it up in Manchester big time, and those spaces are just vanishing. So we go on about our cultural heritage, but could the Happy Mondays happen today? Probably not, because there aren't those empty spaces where you can go and young kids can set the gear up, pay 20 quid a month or something in a crappy old mill and make something. Those spaces are dwindling quick in Manchester, and especially when the cultural sector is under attack, maybe not so much now, but for the past sort of 10, 12 years has been under attack by government. It's like you've really got to value and hold on tight to the things that support culture, because it's not a given, it's not a given.
No.
It's like K-pop and Korea. It's like they're hitting so well culturally now because they've invested heavily, deeply into their culture, which we're not doing that now. It's actually what we're really good at.
Yes.
We're not great bankers. We're great cultural creators. That's what we do well. As a country.
I do think there's a I don't know if I'd call it a positive angle, but the fact that the culture under siege aspect is meaning that there is more co-creation, there is more community foundations being built, rather than the money holders and decision makers creating what they think a community needs. So I think that's a good thing to have come out of a bit of a war on culture, as you say.
I'm going to have to move to my last question, just because we are very short on time. The time always flies, doesn't it, on panels? The last question we have, and hopefully, Evelyn, you can sort of give me your thoughts as well on this. So here in the UK, we're thinking, should there be a kite mark or a badge that sort of symbolises sort of a homelessness-friendly museum or space, or, you know, what, if we did that, what minimum standards would they need to adopt? It's just, and do people think it's a good idea? I also, once the panels have answered this, maybe we'll get some views from the audience too. Evelyn, I'll give you quickly first. We haven't got a lot of money, so a lot of time. Sorry, a lot of time. That was a Freudian. We haven't got a lot of time, so love to hear. I'll send the hat round after. Would love to hear from you on that and what you think, whether that would work in Sao Paulo. Just give Yana a minute
To decipher that.
Bom, primeiro sobre a cocriação, eu acho que é importante dizer que aqui o que viabilizou a existência do Festival Pop Rua é justamente a relação em rede. E aí a rede é o que eu entendo que é o que faz com que os espaços culturais possam de fato aprofundar o seu envolvimento com a comunidade. E um grande exemplo de cocriação, o festival é um grande exemplo de cocriação, ele foi cocriado, né, entre o Museu da Língua e o Sesc Bom Retiro, eu acho que isso é importante dizer. E sobre o selo, aqui em São Paulo já existe algo do tipo, ele é atribuído pela Secretaria Municipal de Direitos Humanos e é um processo de que a gente apresenta os projetos e um quórum formado dentro da secretaria decide quais projetos, quais instituições são contempladas. Isso tem sido importante aqui na cidade de São Paulo, porque quando uma instituição é contemplada, isso é visibilizado para outras instituições, deixa muito evidente que tem um movimento sentido à diversidade, à inclusão e aos direitos humanos, e faz com que as outras instituições corram atrás da mesma identificação, corram atrás de receber o mesmo selo.
So, first of all, before talking about the kite mark, in terms of co-creation, the festival only happened because of the network that was created with other organisations, and that allowed them to deepen their connection with the homeless population in Sao Paulo. And it also involved other organisations as well. So as well as the museum, there was the SESC, which is a specific type of cultural organisation in Brazil that was involved in creating it. As for the kite market itself, there is something that is similar to this in Sao Paulo. It's awarded by the Municipal Human Rights Department, the City Council's Human Rights Department. And what happens is the projects and institutions have to present their case, as it were, in order to get that seal of approval. And this is very important in Sao Paulo because it shows there's a movement towards diversity, towards inclusion by cultural organisations, and it means that other cultural organisations then want to get on board with this too.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to come back to the panel and to get your views. And maybe it's a kite mark that's a community sort of friendly space, whatever wording you want to use, that welcomes people, I mean actively, but we can chew on the name afterwards. But what's people's thoughts?
We had a bit of a discussion about this before, and we sort of, a little bit torn about it and its potential to be used as just something to like flex your woke credentials, oh yeah, we've got the kite mark. But going back to what we said sort of right at the very beginning, is one of the biggest barriers to overcome is within individuals, that these spaces are not for me. And we think there's definitely something powerful and important in literal signage saying, actually, this is for you, you know. So, yeah, from that point of view, we think it could be a good thing.
And that's something that sort of, Kathy, what you said earlier about, you know, this is a space being quite shiny and, you know, feeling like what actually is it. And I think with our building as well, it's kind of in a part of town, it's kind of a newish sort of developed part of town.
It's
fancy, corporate, high rise. And I think there is a certain element of, you know, that as you were saying, how do you create that community around actually feeling welcome within the space? And so I think, although I would never want a kite mark to be tokenistic or siloed in terms of like, because actually what we're trying to achieve is welcoming for everybody, and that everybody is welcome in that space. I think sometimes initially, and particularly in a new building such as ours, to actually be very vocal about, we actively want you, you know, we want you to be here.
It's
We
not that
want
you're
you to-
allowed here.
No, exactly.
We
So I
want
think,
you here.
here.
so I think that's for me, that's where I
right.
feel torn between it being something which becomes a bit of a tick box exercise versus something that actually really speaks and shouts, come in, this is...
So
you
what
know,
I'm hearing is like the sort of the criteria for it would need to be really rigorous. Like, you know, it's not like you can just get a badge for your website by emailing like that. I'm looking at Matt's face.
I don't know, because I think actually, like, cultural organisations around the UK, they're all in very different places.
They are.
And so if there's a rigorous set of standards which is beyond a region of most cultural organisations in one region of the UK, how are you going to build a network?
It's true.
And I think what I'm hearing is that the idea of a kite mark should be like a seed for building networks of practice. I think it's really dangerous if a kite mark is like something you're extrinsically motivated by. It needs to be... You need to be coming out from an intrinsic point of view, which is like you're passionate for going for this cultural kite mark, and it's a step on the journey, and the journey continues afterwards, rather than it being, you know, an end in
We've
and
done
of
it.
itself.
Yeah.
Is there like secret like signs? You know, like like.
The things, I think the secret signs, and I know, but I think that the thing that Evelyn said about it's awarded by, I forget what it's department.
Human Rights.
Human
Yeah.
rights,
Yeah.
So I think it's depending on who it's awarded by is significant as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Because there are, you know, there are buildings that can call themselves inclusive. There's a slight sort of intersectional overlap with people with access requirements. There's a difference between having the facilities and the capacity to be truly welcoming, truly inclusive, versus the minutiae of things that you have to do in order to be able to say you are.
Yeah.
And it's so different, and I think that would be a significant thing. What we don't want is a kite mark that allows us to say, done. We can stop trying. I think we can't stop.
Yeah.
We can't stop celebrating the fact that it's about the people that we're bringing in, and how. And I would say the how is mostly the people that are in the building.
That's what a fantastic answer. Yeah. And just to say, you know, obviously you can find out more if you book our Arts and Homelessness International's training on cultural spaces. But it's part of what we do is go through all of we go through all of this sort of about the physical design of a space, of, you know, the barriers that can happen through signage or lack of signage, or, you know, it's very complicated. And then when we come and train organisations, I have to say we did train ODAC, Old Durham Arts Centre. We like to think it's all because of us. But
Anything I say is on them.
No. But you went the extra mile, and I believe we also trained the security staff in Regent's Place.
Before I started here.
So that is
They've been
key.
great.
So it means in this area that people aren't moved on overnight. They might be in the morning, but the security staff or have actually bought into this. So I think that's
They
part
will
of it.
signpost as well.
They
They don't just wake
signpost.
people up and move them on. They signpost to
So that,
the streets.
so it's key, and that's what you were saying. It's in a shiny new centre, and I like this. It's about the welcome. So maybe there's this movement of the radical welcome happening. That it's going that extra mile. Maybe that is all that is needed. It's a radical welcome kite mark. I don't know. We will take some questions now, if there are any in the room. We've got 7 minutes. Do we have any questions for any of our panellists at all?
Just to echo Simon's point, and if more museums just had a big sign on them saying, come in and look around.
Yes.
In big letters. Simple
Free
as
of
that.
charge.
No,
Yes.
yeah, whatever, just come in and look around. Literally, a command poster of some sort. If more museums had that, more people would actually go in and look around.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
You know, I was at a museum recently, I won't name it, fairly major London attraction.
No
And,
naming
I was in a
shame.
queue and I wasn't told how long the queue would be, and then I got to the front, I was asked to put my bag in a bag and then let into the space. So, you know, I think quite a lot, you know, people in this room and on the panel, like, they think a lot and reflect quite deeply on a lot of this, and reflection, I think, is such an important part of learning and growing and becoming more inclusive. It can't just be done with a kite mark and training package and, you know, sort of continuous process.
Yeah.
There's so many cultural, they don't think about this stuff.
No,
they just
I
don't
know.
think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why, you know, even just the basics get forgotten.
Yeah, and it is because you need, you know, if you've never experienced these issues, you know, it's not going to occur to you how traumatic
Well,
that
I mean,
might
when
be.
people are passing a museum and don't know they can go in.
Yes.
It doesn't exist, they
Yeah,
come in.
yeah, yeah.
Katie, we have a...
Oh, I have a question at the back. I might have to repeat it for sound, I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you've got the mics, great.
Well, yeah, it's fully on mine.
Yeah, so anyway, the idea of spaces for everyone, the fact that there's spaces or empty buildings that aren't used for anything, and some of them might not be safe to be used as housing, but they could be spaces where you could put on cultural events or anything that, you know, people maybe in all sorts of areas and that, you know, anybody could access. Do you think it's important to speak to councils and other organisations to try and open up these spaces?
Yes.
I mean,
Speak to that, yeah.
I mean, I guess it's happening a lot already, because a lot of town centres are having to rethink what a town centre is for now that loads of shops are shutting down. I live in Stockport, where the British Home Stores has closed down, Marks and Spencer's has closed down, and they're reimagining these spaces as cultural and creative spaces. Are they getting the right people in? Do they feel open to the community yet? Sometimes not, but yeah, 100% we need to be rethinking what these spaces are for and what we come into city centres for and town centres, because there's a lot of potential there, I think.
Yeah. And haven't you taken on a new space as well? Like we're here, I've just wondered if that was...
That wasn't given to us by the
right.
council, though.
Okay. All right, sorry.
It's a meanwhile space, but it's really lovely to think that it would otherwise be sitting open. And as it happens, we partnered with Camden People's Theatre and Hopscotch, two other local charities.
Partnerships again.
Yeah, and we I think part of the reason that we did that was to strengthen our application for the space.
Right.
Just in very sort of like blank terms, that's one of the reasons we work with those groups. But it is also, as a team, we're stronger moving forward. We did get the space, and it's now occupied all the time.
That's
and
brilliant.
It's a good big room.
Yeah.
You wouldn't live in it.
No, but it's
As
more
you say,
for
Claire.
it's for more sort of art.
But it's great for art
yeah,
and
tools
rehearsals.
and rehearsals.
We have a
Great.
community
Yeah.
tool library there that anyone can come and
Lovely.
use.
Lovely.
DIY.
I love that. Did you have anything to add on that?
It was only, I think it was part of the sort of the festival's DNA in terms of unused spaces across the city, and I think that was something that came from the original kind of street poem in 2017 and actually 2018, 2019 of like sort of reclaiming some of those spaces in the city, and then but often as a festival we would kind of really try and, you know, reactivate some of those spaces, and some of them, like places like Mayfield Depot now or Albert Hall, you know, were kind of completely empty, you know, derelict buildings, and you know, we tried to really make them now what they are, which is well funded, operating independently art spaces.
Yes. I had the pleasure of being at the Mayfield Depot in David Tovey's
Yes.
Man on Bench show, driving, well, no, I wasn't driving the ambulance, but yes. Anyway, it was a great, amazing atmospheric space to put on a show. I saw that in Sao Paulo quite a lot, Evelyn, that people would just take over spaces that were empty. There are a lot of empty buildings. I don't know if you had anything to comment on that before we wrap up, but I thought I'd just go over to you quickly. Or anything else you want to say before we go?
I've got a question.
We've got 2 minutes, I might not get to it. Let me...
It's a perfect one.
Ouvir vocês está sendo bastante importante, inclusive para perceber que a gente vive em realidades bastante parecidas. Aqui em São Paulo, a gente tem vivido esse mesmo processo de expulsão das pessoas das calçadas e das ruas do centro, e a gente é um equipamento cultural que está no centro do centro, né? A gente está aqui nessa grande estação de trem, que é um marco no centro de São Paulo, e a gente vai se esforçando para manter essa característica de espaço aberto, inclusive atuando como praça para essa população mais vulnerabilizada. E, sobretudo, também apoiando este movimento, que também é muito simbólico da cidade, que são as ocupações, as invasões. A gente tem um número bastante simbólico de ocupações por moradia, mas também de ocupações artísticas. E o próprio Festival Pop Rua buscou se aproximar e apoiar algumas dessas ocupações artísticas, assim como é a Companhia Munguza. Então, são realidades muito similares.
So, it's really important to hear what you've been saying in London, because it makes me realise that we live in similar spaces, because we also experience this expulsion and removal of homeless people from the streets and pavements of Sao Paulo. And where we are it's not just the centre, we're in the centre of the centre, and in fact that railway station that you mentioned earlier, Katie, is like a really sort of famous landmark in Sao Paulo. So it encourages us to make sure that our space is clearly seen as being open. In fact, we consider it's like a sort of square, as it were, the town square, I don't know if that's the right word, but for people who are homeless. And we also, through the festival, help support some of these squats in empty buildings that happen, because there are loads of squats in Sao Paulo. Some of them are squats that people live in, but some of them are artistic spaces too, and through the festival we've got closer to some of those artistic collectives. Like, I think it was the Companhia Munguza that she mentioned as one of the artistic spaces that is squatting in an empty building at the moment.
I'm so sorry, we've run out of time. We have another thing hot on the heels of this panel. We have the wonderful performance by Lisa Ogan. Don't miss that, it's going to be very special. But let me just take the moment to thank my lovely panellists today. So Claire from the Old Diorama, Matt Turtle from the Museum of Homelessness, Sarah from the Factory International, and Simon from Street Poem, and then Evelyn, of course, from the Museum of Portuguese Language, all the way over in São Paulo. Thank you, everybody. Run out of time, but thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.